The Revised Penal Code of the Republic of the Philippines, Volume 2.
Foreword to the video book volumes. Note: this foreword is not part of the Revised Penal Code itself. To skip this section, go to the table of contents in the video description below, and click on the time link of your desired section. This section is intended to quickly explain how the Revised Penal Code is organized and presented insofar as this and 3 other related video book volumes are concerned. This section also explains how best to navigate through, and find specific sections, in this 4-volume video book series. The Revised Penal Code's hierarchical order. The Revised Penal Code document is organized in the following hierarchical order. Number 1. Books. The Revised Penal Code is divided into 2 books, namely: Book 1. General provisions regarding the date of enforcement and application of the provisions of this code, and regarding the offenses, the persons liable and the penalties. Book 2. Crimes and penalties. Number 2. Titles. Each of the 2 books is divided into several titles. Book 1 has 5 titles, while Book 2 has 15 titles. The title numbers start at number 1 for each book. Number 3. Chapters. Titles are subdivided into chapters. Chapter numbers restart at number 1 for each new title. Number 4. Sections. When a chapter is considerably long, it may be further subdivided into sections. Section numbers restart at number 1 for each new chapter. Number 5. Articles. An article is the Revised Penal Code's basic unit of information. Each article is essentially a unique provision of the Revised Penal Code. The Revised Penal Code has a total of 367 articles numbered continuously from 1 through 367. Article numbers do not restart at number 1 for each book, title, chapter, or section. Instead, the article numbers continue through, from Book 1 to Book 2, and through all the titles, chapters, and sections. Number 6. Numbered and/or lettered subsections. Some articles may have numbered and/or lettered subsections. This is particularly true for articles that need to list down and enumerate certain items, like conditions, requirements, etc. There can also be nested lists inside articles, in which case they are presented as lettered lists within numbered lists, or vice versa. The 4 video book volumes. The Revised Penal Code is presented herewith as a 4-volume video book series, as follows. Volume 1 contains an introduction, which is not part of the Revised Penal Code itself, and Book 1 of the Revised Penal Code. Volumes 2 to 4 contain Book 2 of the Revised Penal Code, with each volume containing part of Book 2. The 15 titles of Book 2 are divided into Part 1, Part 2, and Part 3, with each part containing 5 titles each. Take note that Book 1 and Book 2 are actual labels used in the Revised Penal Code. By the way, each volume is preceded by this foreword, with a table of contents to preview the contents of the volume. Each of the 4 volumes can be accessed and consumed as a video presentation, or as part of the Revised Penal Code playlist in our YouTube channel. Table of Contents Volume 2. The Revised Penal Code Book 2, Crimes and Penalties, pages 6 to 175. Title 1, Crimes Against National Security and the Law of Nations, pages 7 to 12. Title 2, Crimes Against the Fundamental Laws of the State, pages 13 to 18. Title 3, Crimes Against Public Order, pages 19 to 37. Title 4, Crimes Against Public Interest, pages 38 to 56. Title 5, Crimes Relative to Opium and Other Prohibited Drugs, pages 57 to 60. This table of content is also available in the video description below, with clickable time links to quickly go to each specified portion of the Revised Penal Code. The Revised Penal Code, Volume 2, will commence in the next page. Continuing from Volume 1, Volume 2 will start with Book 2, Title 1, Article 114.
Book 2. Crimes and Penalties. Title 1. Crimes Against National Security and the Law of Nations. Chapter 1. Crimes Against National Security. Section 1. Treason and Espionage. Article 114. Treason. Any person who, owing allegiance to, the United States or, the government of the Philippine Islands, not being a foreigner, levies war against them or adheres to their enemies, giving them aid or comfort within the Philippine Islands or elsewhere, shall be punished by reclusion temporal to death and shall pay a fine not to exceed 20,000 pesos. No person shall be convicted of treason unless on the testimony of 2 witnesses at least to the same overt act or on confession of the accused in open court. Likewise, an alien, residing in the Philippine Islands, who commits acts of treason as defined in paragraph 1 of this article shall be punished by prisión mayor to death and shall pay a fine not to exceed 20,000 pesos. As amended by EO No. 44, May 31, 1945. Article 115. Conspiracy and proposal to commit treason, penalty. The conspiracy or proposal to commit the crime of treason shall be punished respectively by prisión mayor and a fine not exceeding 10,000 pesos, and prisión correccional and a fine not exceeding 5,000 pesos. Article 116. Misprision of treason. Every person owing allegiance to the United States, the government of the Philippine Islands, without being a foreigner and having knowledge of any conspiracy against them, conceals or does not disclose and make known the same, as soon as possible to the governor or fiscal of the province, or the mayor or fiscal of the city in which he resides, as the case may be, shall be punished as an accessory to the crime of treason. Article 117. Espionage. The penalty of prisión correccional shall be inflicted upon any person who 1. Without authority therefore, enters a warship, fort, or naval or military establishment or reservation to obtain any information, plans, photographs, or other data of a confidential nature relative to the defense of the Philippine archipelago, or 2. Being in possession, by reason of the public office he holds, of the articles, data, or information referred to in the preceding paragraph, discloses their contents to a representative of a foreign nation. The penalty next higher in degree shall be imposed if the offender be a public officer or employee. Section 2. Provoking war and disloyalty in case of war. Article 118. Inciting to war or giving motives for reprisals. The penalty of reclusion temporal shall be imposed upon any public officer or employee, and that of prisión mayor upon any private individual, who, by unlawful or unauthorized acts provokes or gives occasion for a war involving or liable to involve the Philippine Islands or exposes Filipino citizens to reprisals on their persons or property. Article 119. Violation of neutrality. The penalty of prisión correccional shall be inflicted upon anyone who, on the occasion of a war in which the government is not involved, violates any regulation issued by competent authority for the purpose of enforcing neutrality. Article 120. Correspondence with hostile country. Any person who in time of war shall have correspondence with an enemy country or territory occupied by enemy troops shall be punished. 1. By prisión correccional, if the correspondence has been prohibited by the government. 2. By prisión mayor, if such correspondence be carried on in ciphers or conventional signs, and 3. By reclusion temporal, if notice or information be given thereby which might be useful to the enemy. If the offender intended to aid the enemy by giving such notice or information, he shall suffer the penalty of reclusion temporal to death. Article 121. Flight to enemy country. The penalty of arresto mayor shall be inflicted upon any person who, owing allegiance to the government, attempts to flee or go to an enemy country when prohibited by competent authority. Section 3. Piracy and mutiny on the high seas or in Philippine waters. Article 122. Piracy in general and mutiny on the high seas. The penalty of reclusion temporal shall be inflicted upon any person who, on the high seas, shall attack or seize a vessel or, not being a member of its complement nor a passenger, shall seize the whole or part of the cargo of said vessel, its equipment, or personal belongings of its complement or passengers. The same penalty shall be inflicted in case of mutiny on the high seas or in Philippine waters. Article 123. Qualified piracy. The penalty of reclusion temporal to death shall be imposed upon those who commit any of the crimes referred to in the preceding article, under any of the following circumstances. 1. Whenever they have seized a vessel by boarding or firing upon the same. 2. Whenever the pirates have abandoned their victims without means of saving themselves, or 3. whenever the crime is accompanied by murder, homicide, physical injuries, or rape. Title II. Crimes against the fundamental laws of the state. Chapter 1. Arbitrary detention or expulsion, violation of dwelling, prohibition, interruption, and dissolution of peaceful meetings and crimes against religious worship. Section 1. Arbitrary detention and expulsion. Article 124. Arbitrary detention. Any public officer or employee who, without legal grounds, detains a person, shall suffer 1. The penalty of arresto mayor in its maximum period to prisión correccional in its minimum period, if the detention has not exceeded 3 days. 2. The penalty of prisión correccional in its medium and maximum periods, if the detention has continued more than 3 but not more than 15 days. 3. The penalty of prisión mayor, if the detention has continued for more than 15 days but not more than 6 months, and 4. That of reclusion temporal, if the detention shall have exceeded 6 months. The commission of a crime, or violent insanity or any other ailment requiring the compulsory confinement of the patient in a hospital, shall be considered legal grounds for the detention of any person. Article 125. Delay in the delivery of detained persons to the proper judicial authorities. The penalties provided in the next preceding article shall be imposed upon the public officer or employee who shall detain any person for some legal ground and shall fail to deliver such person to the proper judicial authorities within the period of 12 hours, for crimes or offenses punishable by light penalties, or their equivalent, 18 hours, for crimes or offenses punishable by correctional penalties, or their equivalent, and 36 hours, for crimes or offenses punishable by afflictive or capital penalties, or their equivalent. In every case, the person detained shall be informed of the cause of his detention and shall be allowed upon his request to communicate and confer at any time with his attorney or counsel. As amended by EO numbers 59 and 272, November 7, 1986 and July 25, 1987, respectively. Article 126. Delaying release. The penalties provided for in Article 124 shall be imposed upon any public officer or employee who delays for the period of time specified therein the performance of any judicial or executive order for the release of a prisoner or detention prisoner, or unduly delays the service of the notice of such order to said prisoner or the proceedings upon any petition for the liberation of such person. Article 127. Expulsion. The penalty of prisión correccional shall be imposed upon any public officer or employee who, not being thereunto authorized by law, shall expel any person from the Philippine Islands or shall compel such person to change his residence. Section 2. Violation of domicile. Article 128. Violation of domicile. The penalty of prisión correccional in its minimum period shall be imposed upon any public officer or employee who, not being authorized by judicial order, shall enter any dwelling against the will of the owner thereof, search papers or other effects found therein without the previous consent of such owner, or having surreptitiously entered said dwelling, and being required to leave the premises, shall refuse to do so. If the offense be committed in the nighttime, or if any papers or effects not constituting evidence of a crime be not returned immediately after the search made by the offender, the penalty shall be prisión correccional in its medium and maximum periods. Article 129. Search warrants maliciously obtained and abuse in the service of those legally obtained. In addition to the liability attaching to the offender for the commission of any other offense, the penalty of arresto mayor in its maximum period to prisión correccional in its minimum period and a fine not exceeding 1,000 pesos shall be imposed upon any public officer or employee who shall procure a search warrant without just cause, or, having legally procured the same, shall exceed his authority or use unnecessary severity in executing the same. Article 130. Searching domicile without witnesses. The penalty of arresto mayor in its medium and maximum periods shall be imposed upon a public officer or employee who, in cases where a search is proper, shall search the domicile, papers or other belongings of any person, in the absence of the latter, any member of his family, or in their default, without the presence of 2 witnesses residing in the same locality. Section 3. Prohibition, interruption and dissolution of peaceful meetings. Article 131. Prohibition, interruption and dissolution of peaceful meetings. The penalty of prisión correccional in its minimum period shall be imposed upon any public officer or employee who, without legal ground, shall prohibit or interrupt the holding of a peaceful meeting or shall dissolve the same. The same penalty shall be imposed upon a public officer or employee who shall hinder any person from joining any lawful association or from attending any of its meetings. The same penalty shall be imposed upon any public officer or employee who shall prohibit or hinder any person from addressing, either alone or together with others, any petition to the authorities for the correction of abuses or redress of grievances. Section 4. Crimes against religious worship. Article 132. Interruption of religious worship. The penalty of prisión correccional in its minimum period shall be imposed upon any public officer or employee who shall prevent or disturb the ceremonies or manifestations of any religion. If the crime shall have been committed with violence or threats, the penalty shall be prisión correccional in its medium and maximum periods. Article 133. Offending the religious feelings. The penalty of arresto mayor in its maximum period to prisión correccional in its minimum period shall be imposed upon anyone who, in a place devoted to religious worship or during the celebration of any religious ceremony shall perform acts notoriously offensive to the feelings of the faithful. Title 3. Crimes against public order. Chapter 1. Rebellion, Sedition and Disloyalty. Article 134. Rebellion or insurrection, how committed. The crime of rebellion or insurrection is committed by rising publicly and taking arms against the government for the purpose of removing from the allegiance to said government or its laws, the territory of the Philippine Islands or any part thereof, of any body of land, naval or other armed forces, depriving the chief executive or the legislature, wholly or partially, of any of their powers or prerogatives. As amended by Republic Act 6968. Article 134A. Coup d'état, how committed. The crime of coup d'état is a swift attack accompanied by violence, intimidation, threat, strategy or stealth, directed against duly constituted authorities of the Republic of the Philippines, or any military camp or installation, communications network, public utilities or other facilities needed for the exercise and continued possession of power, singly or simultaneously carried out anywhere in the Philippines by any person or persons belonging to the military or police or holding any public office of employment with or without civilian support or participation for the purpose of seizing or diminishing state power. As amended by Republic Act 6968. Article 135. Penalty for rebellion, insurrection or coup d'état. Any person who promotes, maintains, or heads rebellion or insurrection shall suffer the penalty of reclusion perpetua. Any person merely participating or executing the commands of others in a rebellion shall suffer the penalty of reclusion temporal. Any person who leads or in any manner directs or commands others to undertake a coup d'état shall suffer the penalty of reclusion perpetua. Any person in the government service who participates or executes directions or commands of others in undertaking a coup d'état shall suffer the penalty of prisión mayor in its maximum period. Any person not in the government service who participates or in any manner supports, finances, abets or aids in undertaking a coup d'état shall suffer the penalty of reclusion temporal in its maximum period. When the rebellion, insurrection, or coup d'état shall be under the command of unknown leaders, any person who in fact directed the others, spoke for them, signed receipts and other documents issued in their name, as performed similar acts, on behalf or the rebels shall be deemed a leader of such a rebellion, insurrection, or coup d'état. As amended by Republic Act 6968, approved on October 24, 1990. Article 136. Conspiracy and proposal to commit coup d'état, rebellion or insurrection. The conspiracy and proposal to commit coup d'état shall be punished by prisión mayor in minimum period and a fine which shall not exceed 8,000 pesos. The conspiracy and proposal to commit rebellion or insurrection shall be punished respectively by prisión correccional in its maximum period in a fine which shall not exceed 5,000 pesos and by prisión correccional in its medium period in a fine not exceeding 2,000 pesos. As amended by Republic Act 6968, approved October 24, 1990. Article 137. Disloyalty of public officers or employees. The penalty of prisión correccional in its minimum period shall be imposed upon public officers or employees who have failed to resist a rebellion by all the means in their power, or shall continue to discharge the duties of their offices under the control of the rebels or shall accept appointment to office under them. Reinstated by EO number 187. Article 138. Inciting a rebellion or insurrection. The penalty of prisión mayor in its minimum period shall be imposed upon any person who, without taking arms or being in open hostility against the government, shall incite others to the execution of any of the acts specified in Article 134 of this code, by means of speeches, proclamations, writings, emblems, banners or other representations tending to the same end. Reinstated by EO number 187. Article 139. Sedition, how committed. The crime of sedition is committed by persons who rise publicly and tumultuously in order to attain by force, intimidation, or by other means outside of legal methods, any of the following objects. 1. To prevent the promulgation or execution of any law or the holding of any popular election. 2. To prevent the national government, or any provincial or municipal government or any public officer thereof from freely exercising its or his functions, or prevent the execution of any administrative order. 3. To inflict any act of hate or revenge upon the person or property of any public officer or employee. 4. To commit, for any political or social end, any act of hate or revenge against private persons or any social class and 5. To despoil, for any political or social end, any person, municipality or province, or the national government, or the government of the United States, of all its property or any part thereof. Article 140. Penalty for sedition. The leader of a sedition shall suffer the penalty of prisión mayor in its minimum period in a fine not exceeding 10,000 pesos. Other persons participating therein shall suffer the penalty of prisión correccional in its maximum period in a fine not exceeding 5,000 pesos. Reinstated by EO number 187. Article 141. Conspiracy to commit sedition. Persons conspiring to commit the crime of sedition shall be punished by prisión correccional in its medium period in a fine not exceeding 2,000 pesos. Reinstated by EO number 187. Article 142. Inciting to sedition. The penalty of prisión correccional in its maximum period in a fine not exceeding 2,000 pesos shall be imposed upon any person who, without taking any direct part in the crime of sedition, should incite others to the accomplishment of any of the acts which constitute sedition, by means of speeches, proclamations, writings, emblems, cartoons, banners, or other representations tending to the same end, or upon any person or persons who shall utter seditious words or speeches, write, publish, or circulate scurrilous libels against the government of the United States or the government of the Commonwealth of the Philippines, or any of the duly constituted authorities thereof, or which tend to disturb or obstruct any lawful officer in executing the functions of his office, or which tend to instigate others to cabal and meet together for unlawful purposes, or which suggest or incite rebellious conspiracies or riots, or which lead or tend to stir up the people against the lawful authorities or to disturb the peace of the community, the safety and order of the government, or who shall knowingly conceal such evil practices. Reinstated by EO number 187. Chapter 2. Crimes against popular representation. Section 1. Crimes against legislative bodies and similar bodies. Article 143. Act tending to prevent the meeting of the Assembly and similar bodies. The penalty of prisión correccional or a fine ranging from 200 to 2,000 pesos, or both, shall be imposed upon any person who, by force or fraud, prevents the meeting of the National Assembly, Congress of the Philippines, or of any of its committees or subcommittees, constitutional commissions or committees or divisions thereof, or of any provincial board or city or municipal council or board. Reinstated by EO number 187. Article 144. Disturbance of proceedings. The penalty of arresto mayor or a fine from 200 to 1,000 pesos shall be imposed upon any person who disturbs the meetings of the National Assembly, Congress of the Philippines, or of any of its committees or subcommittees, constitutional commissions or committees or divisions thereof, or of any provincial board or city or municipal council or board, or in the presence of any such body should behave in such manner as to interrupt its proceedings or to impair the respect due it. Reinstated by EO number 187. Section 2. Violation of parliamentary immunity. Article 145. Violation of parliamentary immunity. The penalty of prisión mayor shall be imposed upon any person who shall use force, intimidation, threats, or fraud to prevent any member of the National Assembly, Congress of the Philippines, from attending the meetings of the Assembly, Congress, or of any of its committees or subcommittees, constitutional commissions or committees or divisions thereof, from expressing his opinions or casting his vote, and the penalty of prisión correccional shall be imposed upon any public officer or employee who shall, while the Assembly, Congress, is in regular or special session, arrest or search any member thereof, except in case such member has committed a crime punishable under this code by a penalty higher than prisión mayor. Chapter 3. Illegal Assemblies and Associations. Article 146. Illegal Assemblies. The penalty of prisión correccional in its maximum period to prisión mayor in its medium period shall be imposed upon the organizers or leaders of any meeting attended by armed persons for the purpose of committing any of the crimes punishable under this code, or of any meeting in which the audience is incited to the commission of the crime of treason, rebellion or insurrection, sedition or assault upon a person in authority or his agents. Persons merely present at such meeting shall suffer the penalty of arresto mayor, unless they are armed, in which case the penalty shall be prisión correccional. If any person present at the meeting carries an unlicensed firearm, it shall be presumed that the purpose of said meeting, insofar as he is concerned, is to commit acts punishable under this code, and he shall be considered a leader or organizer of the meeting within the purview of the preceding paragraph. As used in this article, the word meeting shall be understood to include a gathering or group, whether in a fixed place or moving. Reinstated by EO number 187. Article 147. Illegal Associations. The penalty of prisión correccional in its minimum and medium periods and a fine not exceeding 1,000 pesos shall be imposed upon the founders, directors, and presidents of associations totally or partially organized for the purpose of committing any of the crimes punishable under this code or for some purpose contrary to public morals. Mere members of said associations shall suffer the penalty of arresto mayor. Reinstated by EO number 187. Chapter 4. Assault upon, and resistance and disobedience to, persons in authority and their agents. Article 148. Direct assaults. Any person or persons who, without a public uprising, shall employ force or intimidation for the attainment of any of the purpose enumerated in defining the crimes of rebellion and sedition, or shall attack, employ force, or seriously intimidate or resist any person in authority or any of his agents, while engaged in the performance of official duties, or on occasion of such performance, shall suffer the penalty of prisión correccional in its medium and maximum periods and a fine not exceeding 1,000 pesos, when the assault is committed with a weapon or when the offender is a public officer or employee, or when the offender lays hands upon a person in authority. If none of these circumstances be present, the penalty of prisión correccional in its minimum period and a fine not exceeding 500 pesos shall be imposed. Article 149. Indirect assaults. The penalty of prisión correccional in its minimum and medium periods and a fine not exceeding 500 pesos shall be imposed upon any person who shall make use of force or intimidation upon any person coming to the aid of the authorities or their agents on occasion of the commission of any of the crimes defined in the next preceding article. Article 150. Disobedience to summons issued by the National Assembly, its committees or subcommittees, by the constitutional commissions, its committees, subcommittees or divisions. The penalty of arresto mayor or a fine ranging from 200 to 1,000 pesos, or both such fine and imprisonment shall be imposed upon any person who, having been duly summoned to attend as a witness before the National Assembly, Congress, its special or standing committees and subcommittees, the constitutional commissions and its committees, subcommittees, or divisions, or before any commission or committee chairman or member authorized to summon witnesses, refuses, without legal excuse, to obey such summons, or being present before any such legislative or constitutional body or official, refuses to be sworn or placed under affirmation or to answer any legal inquiry or to produce any books, papers, documents, or records in his possession, when required by them to do so in the exercise of their functions. The same penalty shall be imposed upon any person who shall restrain another from attending as a witness, or who shall induce disobedience to a summon or refusal to be sworn by any such body or official. Article 151. Resistance and disobedience to a person in authority or the agents of such person. The penalty of arresto mayor and a fine not exceeding 500 pesos shall be imposed upon any person who, not being included in the provisions of the preceding articles, shall resist or seriously disobey any person in authority or the agents of such person, while engaged in the performance of official duties. When the disobedience to an agent of a person in authority is not of a serious nature, the penalty of arresto menor or a fine ranging from 10 to 100 pesos shall be imposed upon the offender. Article 152. Persons in authority and agents of persons in authority who shall be deemed as such. In applying the provisions of the preceding and other articles of this code, any person directly vested with jurisdiction, whether as an individual or as a member of some court or governmental corporation, board, or commission, shall be deemed a person in authority. A barrio captain and a barangay chairman shall also be deemed a person in authority. A person who, by direct provision of law or by election or by appointment by competent authority, is charged with the maintenance of public order and the protection and security of life and property, such as a barrio councilman, barrio policeman and barangay leader, and any person who comes to the aid of persons in authority, shall be deemed an agent of a person in authority. In applying the provisions of Articles 148 and 151 of this code, teachers, professors and persons charged with the supervision of public or duly recognized private schools, colleges and universities, and lawyers in the actual performance of their professional duties or on the occasion of such performance, shall be deemed persons in authority. As amended by Presidential Decree No. 299, September 19, 1973, and Batas Pambanza Bilang 873, June 12, 1985. Chapter 5, Public Disorders. Article 153. Tumults and other disturbance of public orders and tumultuous disturbance or interruption liable to cause disturbance. The penalty of arresto mayor in its medium period to prisión correccional in its minimum period and a fine not exceeding 1,000 pesos shall be imposed upon any person who shall cause any serious disturbance in a public place, office, or establishment, or shall interrupt or disturb public performances, functions or gatherings, or peaceful meetings, if the act is not included in the provisions of Articles 131 and 132. The penalty next higher in degree shall be imposed upon persons causing any disturbance or interruption of a tumultuous character. The disturbance or interruption shall be deemed to be tumultuous if caused by more than 3 persons who are armed or provided with means of violence. The penalty of arresto mayor shall be imposed upon any person who in any meeting, association, or public place, shall make any outcry tending to incite rebellion or sedition, or in such place shall display placards or emblems which provoke a disturbance of the public order. The penalty of arresto menor and a fine not to exceed 200 pesos shall be imposed upon these persons who, in violation of the provisions contained in the last clause of Article 85, shall bury with pomp the body of a person who has been legally executed. Article 154. Unlawful use of means of publication and unlawful utterances. The penalty of arresto mayor and a fine ranging from 200 to 1,000 pesos shall be imposed upon 1. Any person who by means of printing, lithography, or any other means of publication shall publish or cause to be published as news any false news which may endanger the public order, or cause damage to the interest or credit of the state. 2. Any person who by the same means, or by words, utterances or speeches shall encourage disobedience to the law or to the constituted authorities or praise, justify, or extol any act punished by law. 3. Any person who shall maliciously publish or cause to be published any official resolution or document without proper authority, or before they have been published officially, or 4. Any person who shall print, publish, or distribute or cause to be printed, published, or distributed books, pamphlets, periodicals, or leaflets which do not bear the real printer's name, or which are classified as anonymous. Article 155. Alarms and scandals. The penalty of arresto menor or a fine not exceeding 200 pesos shall be imposed upon 1. Any person who within any town or public place shall discharge any firearm, rocket, firecracker, or other explosives calculated to cause alarm or danger. 2. Any person who shall instigate or take an active part in any chivalry or other disorderly meeting offensive to another or prejudicial to public tranquility. 3. Any person who, while wandering about at night or while engaged in any other nocturnal amusements, shall disturb the public peace, or 4. Any person who, while intoxicated or otherwise, shall cause any disturbance or scandal in public places, provided that the circumstances of the case shall not make the provisions of Article 153 applicable. Article 156. Delivery of prisoners from jails. The penalty of arresto mayor in its maximum period of prisión correccional in its minimum period shall be imposed upon any person who shall remove from any jail or penal establishment any person confined therein or shall help the escape of such person, by means of violence, intimidation, or bribery. If other means are used, the penalty of arresto mayor shall be imposed. If the escape of the prisoner shall take place outside of said establishments by taking the guards by surprise, the same penalties shall be imposed in their minimum period. Chapter 6. Evasion of service of sentence. Article 157. Evasion of service of sentence. The penalty of prisión correccional in its medium and maximum periods shall be imposed upon any convict who shall evade service of his sentence by escaping during the term of his imprisonment by reason of final judgment. However, if such evasion or escape shall have taken place by means of unlawful entry, by breaking doors, windows, gates, walls, roofs, or floors, or by using picklocks, false keys, deceit, violence or intimidation, or through connivance with other convicts or employees of the penal institution, the penalty shall be prisión correccional in its maximum period. Article 158. Evasion of service of sentence on the occasion of disorder, conflagrations, earthquakes, or other calamities. A convict who shall evade the service of his sentence, by leaving the penal institution where he shall have been confined, on the occasion of disorder resulting from a conflagration, earthquake, explosion, or similar catastrophe, or during a mutiny in which he has not participated, shall suffer an increase of 1/5 of the time still remaining to be served under the original sentence, which in no case shall exceed 6 months, if he shall fail to give himself up to the authorities within 48 hours following the issuance of a proclamation by the chief executive announcing the passing away of such calamity. Convicts who, under the circumstances mentioned in the preceding paragraph, shall give themselves up to the authorities within the above-mentioned period of 48 hours, shall be entitled to the deduction provided in Article 98. Article 159. Other cases of evasion of service of sentence. The penalty of prisión correccional in its minimum period shall be imposed upon the convict who, having been granted conditional pardon by the chief executive, shall violate any of the conditions of such pardon. However, if the penalty remitted by the granting of such pardon be higher than 6 years, the convict shall then suffer the unexpired portion of his original sentence. Chapter 7. Commission of another crime during service of penalty imposed for another previous offense. Article 160. Commission of another crime during service of penalty imposed for another offense of penalty. Besides the provisions of Rule 5 of Article 62, any person who shall commit a felony after having been convicted by final judgment, before beginning to serve such sentence, or while serving the same, shall be punished by the maximum period of the penalty prescribed by law for the new felony. Any convict of the class referred to in this article, who is not a habitual criminal, shall be pardoned at the age of 70 years if he shall have already served out his original sentence, or when he shall complete it after reaching the said age, unless by reason of his conduct or other circumstances he shall not be worthy of such clemency. Title 4. Crimes against Public Interest. Chapter 1. Forgeries. Section 1. Forging the seal of the Government of the Philippine Islands, the signature or stamp of the Chief Executive. Article 161. Counterfeiting the Great Seal of the Government of the Philippine Islands, forging the signature or stamp of the Chief Executive. The penalty of reclusion temporal shall be imposed upon any person who shall forge the Great Seal of the Government of the Philippine Islands or the signature or stamp of the Chief Executive. Article 162. Using forged signature or counterfeit seal or stamp. The penalty of prisión mayor shall be imposed upon any person who shall knowingly make use of the counterfeit seal or forged signature or stamp mentioned in the preceding article. Section 2. Counterfeiting coins. Article 163. Making and importing and uttering false coins. Any person who makes, imports, or utters false coins, in connivance with counterfeiters, or importers, shall suffer 1. Prisión mayor in its minimum and medium periods and a fine not to exceed 10,000 pesos, if the counterfeited coin be silver coin of the Philippines or coin of the Central Bank of the Philippines of 10 centavo denomination or above. 2. Prisión correccional in its minimum and medium periods and a fine of not to exceed 2,000 pesos, if the counterfeited coins be any of the minor coinage of the Philippines or of the Central Bank of the Philippines below 10 centavo denomination. 3. Prisión correccional in its minimum period and a fine not to exceed 1,000 pesos, if the counterfeited coin be currency of a foreign country. As amended by a Public Act No. 4202, approved June 19, 1965. Article 164. Mutilation of coins, importation and utterance of mutilated coins. The penalty of prisión correccional in its minimum period and a fine not to exceed 2,000 pesos shall be imposed upon any person who shall mutilate coins of the legal currency of the United States or of the Philippine Islands or import or utter mutilated current coins, or in connivance with mutilators or importers. Article 165. Selling of false or mutilated coin, without connivance. The person who knowingly, although without the connivance mentioned in the preceding articles, shall possess false or mutilated coin with intent to utter the same, or shall actually utter such coin, shall suffer a penalty lower by 1 degree than that prescribed in said articles. Section 3. Forging treasury or bank notes, obligations and securities, importing and uttering false or forged notes, obligations and securities. Article 166. Forging treasury or bank notes on other documents payable to bearer of importing, and uttering such false or forged notes and documents. The forging or falsification of treasury or bank notes or certificates or other obligations and securities payable to bearer and the importation and uttering in connivance with forgers or importers of such false or forged obligations or notes, shall be punished as follows. 1. By reclusion temporal in its minimum period and a fine not to exceed 10,000 pesos, if the document which has been falsified, counterfeited, or altered, is an obligations or security of the United States or of the Philippines Islands. The word obligation or security of the United States or of the Philippine Islands shall be held to mean all bonds, certificates of indebtedness, national bank notes, fractional notes, certificates of deposit, bills, checks, or drafts for money, drawn by or upon authorized officers of the United States or of the Philippine Islands, and other representatives of value, of whatever denomination, which have been or may be issued under any act of the Congress of the United States or of the Philippine Legislature. 2. By prisión mayor in its maximum period and a fine not to exceed 5,000 pesos, if the falsified or altered document is a circulating note issued by any banking association duly authorized by law to issue the same. 3. By prisión mayor in its medium period and a fine not to exceed 5,000 pesos, if the falsified or counterfeited document was issued by a foreign government. 4. By prisión mayor in its minimum period and a fine not to exceed 2,000 pesos, when the forged or altered document is a circulating note or bill issued by a foreign bank duly authorized therefor. Article 167. Counterfeiting, importing and uttering instruments not payable to bearer. Any person who shall forge, import or utter, in connivance with the forgers or importers, any instrument payable to order or other document of credit not payable to bearer, shall suffer the penalties of prisión correccional in its medium and maximum periods and a fine not exceeding 6,000 pesos. Article 168. Illegal possession and use of false treasury or bank notes and other instruments of credit. Unless the act be one of those coming under the provisions of any of the preceding articles, any person who shall knowingly use or have in his possession, with intent to use any of the false or falsified instruments referred to in this section, shall suffer the penalty next lower in degree than that prescribed in said articles. Article 169. How forgery is committed. The forgery referred to in this section may be committed by any of the following means. 1. By giving to a treasury or bank note or any instrument, payable to bearer or order mentioned therein, the appearance of a true genuine document. 2. By erasing, substituting, counterfeiting or altering by any means the figures, letters, words or signs contained therein. Section 4. Falsification of legislative, public, commercial, and private documents, and wireless, telegraph, and telephone message. Article 170. Falsification of legislative documents. The penalty of prisión correccional in its maximum period and a fine not exceeding 6,000 pesos shall be imposed upon any person who, without proper authority therefore alters any bill, resolution, or ordinance enacted or approved or pending approval by either house of the legislature or any provincial board or municipal council. Article 171. Falsification by public officer, employee or notary or ecclesiastic minister. The penalty of prisión mayor and a fine not to exceed 5,000 pesos shall be imposed upon any public officer, employee, or notary who, taking advantage of his official position, shall falsify a document by committing any of the following acts. 1. Counterfeiting or imitating any handwriting, signature or rubric. 2. Causing it to appear that persons have participated in any act or proceeding when they did not in fact so participate. 3. Attributing to persons who have participated in an act or proceeding statements other than those in fact made by them. 4. Making untruthful statements in a narration of facts. 5. Altering true dates. 6. Making any alteration or intercalation in a genuine document which changes its meaning. 7. Issuing in an authenticated form a document purporting to be a copy of an original document when no such original exists, or including in such a copy a statement contrary to, or different from, that of the genuine original or. 8. Intercalating any instrument or note relative to the issuance thereof in a protocol, registry, or official book. The same penalty shall be imposed upon any ecclesiastical minister who shall commit any of the offenses enumerated in the preceding paragraphs of this article, with respect to any record or document of such character that its falsification may affect the civil status of persons. Article 172. Falsification by private individual and use of falsified documents. The penalty of prisión correccional in its medium and maximum periods and a fine of not more than 5,000 pesos shall be imposed upon 1. Any private individual who shall commit any of the falsifications enumerated in the next preceding article in any public or official document or letter of exchange or any other kind of commercial document, and 2. Any person who, to the damage of a third party, or with the intent to cause such damage, shall in any private document commit any of the acts of falsification enumerated in the next preceding article. Any person who shall knowingly introduce an evidence in any judicial proceeding or to the damage of another or who, with the intent to cause such damage, shall use any of the false documents embraced in the next preceding article, or in any of the foregoing subdivisions of this article, shall be punished by the penalty next lower in degree. Article 173. Falsification of wireless, cable, telegraph and telephone messages, and use of said falsified messages. The penalty of prisión correccional in its medium and maximum periods shall be imposed upon officer or employee of the government or of any private corporation or concern engaged in the service of sending or receiving wireless, cable or telephone message who utters a fictitious wireless, telegraph or telephone message of any system or falsifies the same. Any person who shall use such falsified dispatch to the prejudice of a third party or with the intent of cause such prejudice, shall suffer the penalty next lower in degree. Section 5. Falsification of medical certificates, certificates of merit or services and the like. Article 174. False medical certificates, false certificates of merits or service, etc. The penalties of arresto mayor in its maximum period to prisión correccional in its minimum period and a fine not to exceed 1,000 pesos shall be imposed upon 1. Any physician or surgeon who, in connection with the practice of his profession, shall issue a false certificate and 2. Any public officer who shall issue a false certificate of merit of service, good conduct or similar circumstances. The penalty of arresto mayor shall be imposed upon any private person who shall falsify a certificate falling within the classes mentioned in the two preceding subdivisions. Article 175. Using false certificates. The penalty of arresto menor shall be imposed upon anyone who shall knowingly use any of the false certificates mentioned in the next preceding article. Section 6. Manufacturing, importing, and possession of instruments or implements intended for the commission of falsification. Article 176. Manufacturing and possession of instruments or implements for falsification. The penalty of prison correctional in its medium and maximum periods and a fine not to exceed 10,000 pesos shall be imposed upon any person who shall make or introduce into the Philippine Islands any stamps, dies, marks, or other instruments or implements intended to be used in the commission of the offenses of counterfeiting or falsification mentioned in the preceding sections of this chapter. Any person who, with the intention of using them, shall have in his possession any of the instruments or implements mentioned in the preceding paragraphs, shall suffer the penalty next lower in degree than that provided therein. Chapter 2. Other falsities. Section 1. Usurpation of authority, rank, title, and improper use of names, uniforms and insignia. Article 177. Usurpation of authority or official functions. Any person who shall knowingly and falsely represent himself to be an officer, agent or representative of any department or agency of the Philippine government or of any foreign government, or who, under pretense of official position, shall perform any act pertaining to any person in authority or public officer of the Philippine government or any foreign government or any agency thereof, without being lawfully entitled to do so, shall suffer the penalty of prisión correccional in its minimum and medium periods. Article 178. Using fictitious name and concealing true name. The penalty of arresto mayor and a fine not to exceed 500 pesos shall be imposed upon any person who shall publicly use a fictitious name for the purpose of concealing a crime, evading the execution of a judgment or causing damage. Any person who conceals his true name and other personal circumstances shall be punished by arresto menor or a fine not to exceed 200 pesos. Article 179. Illegal use of uniforms or insignia. The penalty of arresto mayor shall be imposed upon any person who shall publicly and improperly make use of insignia, uniforms or dress pertaining to an office not held by such person or to a class of persons of which he is not a member. Section 2. False testimony. Article 180. False testimony against a defendant. Any person who shall give false testimony against the defendant in any criminal case shall suffer 1. The penalty of reclusion temporal, if the defendant in said case shall have been sentenced to death. 2. The penalty of prisión mayor, if the defendant shall have been sentenced to reclusion temporal or reclusion perpetua. 3. The penalty of prisión correccional, if the defendant shall have been sentenced to any other afflictive penalty and 4. The penalty of arresto mayor, if the defendant shall have been sentenced to a correctional penalty or a fine, or shall have been acquitted. In cases provided in subdivisions 3 and 4 of this article, the offender shall further suffer a fine not to exceed 1,000 pesos. Article 181. False testimony favorable to the defendants. Any person who shall give false testimony in favor of the defendant in a criminal case shall suffer the penalties of arresto mayor in its maximum period to prisión correccional in its minimum period of fine not to exceed 1,000 pesos, if the prosecution is for a felony punishable by an afflictive penalty, and the penalty of arresto mayor in any other case. Article 182. False testimony in civil cases. Any person found guilty of false testimony in a civil case shall suffer the penalty of prisión correccional in its minimum period and a fine not to exceed 6,000 pesos, if the amount in controversy shall exceed 5,000 pesos, and the penalty of arresto mayor in its maximum period to prisión correccional in its minimum period and a fine not to exceed 1,000 pesos, if the amount in controversy shall not exceed said amount or cannot be estimated. Article 183. False testimony in other cases and perjury in solemn affirmation. The penalty of arresto mayor in its maximum period to prisión correccional in its minimum period shall be imposed upon any person who knowingly makes untruthful statements and not being included in the provisions of the next preceding articles, shall testify under oath, or make an affidavit, upon any material matter before a competent person authorized to administer an oath in cases in which the law so requires. Any person who, in case of a solemn affirmation made in lieu of an oath, shall commit any of the falsehoods mentioned in this and the 3 preceding articles of this section, shall suffer the respective penalties provided therein. Article 184. Offering false testimony in evidence. Any person who shall knowingly offer in evidence a false witness or testimony in any judicial or official proceeding shall be punished as guilty of false testimony and shall suffer the respective penalties provided in this section. Chapter 3. Frauds. Section 1. Machinations, Monopolies and Combinations. Article 185. Machinations in public auctions. Any person who shall solicit any gift or promise as a consideration for refraining from taking part in any public auction, and any person who shall attempt to cause bidders to stay away from an auction by threats, gifts, promises, or any other artifice, with intent to cause the reduction of the price of the thing auctioned, shall suffer the penalty of prisión correccional in its minimum period and a fine ranging from 10 to 50% of the value of the thing auctioned. Article 186. Monopolies and combinations in restraint of trade. The penalty of prisión correccional in its minimum period or a fine ranging from 200 to 6,000 pesos, or both, shall be imposed upon 1. Any person who shall enter into any contract or agreement or shall take part in any conspiracy or combination in the form of a trust or otherwise, in restraint of trade or commerce or to prevent by artificial means free competition in the market. 2. Any person who shall monopolize any merchandise or object of trade or commerce, or shall combine with any other person or persons to monopolize a merchandise or object in order to alter the price thereof by spreading false rumors or making use of any other article to restrain free competition in the market. 3. Any person who, being a manufacturer, producer, or processor of any merchandise or object of commerce or an importer of any merchandise or object of commerce from any foreign country, either as principal or agent, wholesaler or retailer, shall combine, conspire or agree in any manner with any person likewise engaged in the manufacture, production, processing, assembling or importation of such merchandise or object of commerce or with any other persons not so similarly engaged for the purpose of making transactions prejudicial to lawful commerce, or of increasing the market price in any part of the Philippines, of any such merchandise or object of commerce manufactured, produced, processed, assembled in or imported into the Philippines, or of any article in the manufacture of which such manufactured, produced, or imported merchandise or object of commerce is used. If the offense mentioned in this article affects any food substance, motor fuel or lubricants, or other articles of prime necessity, The penalty shall be that of prisión mayor in its maximum and medium periods, it being sufficient for the imposition thereof that the initial steps have been taken toward carrying out the purposes of the combination. Any property possessed under any contract or by any combination mentioned in the preceding paragraphs, and being the subject thereof, shall be forfeited to the government of the Philippines. Whenever any of the offenses described above is committed by a corporation or association, the president and each one of its agents or representatives in the Philippines in case of a foreign corporation or association, who shall have knowingly permitted or failed to prevent the commission of such offense, shall be held liable as principals thereof. Section 2. Frauds in Commerce and Industry. Article 187. Importation and disposition of falsely marked articles or merchandise made of gold, silver, or other precious metals or their alloys. The penalty of prisión correccional or a fine ranging from 200 to 1,000 pesos, or both, shall be imposed on any person who shall knowingly import or sell or dispose of any article or merchandise made of gold, silver, or other precious metals, or their alloys, with stamps, brands, or marks which fail to indicate the actual fineness or quality of said metals or alloys. Any stamp, brand, label, or mark shall be deemed to fail to indicate the actual fineness of the article on which it is engraved, printed, stamped, labeled, or attached, when the rest of the article shows that the quality or fineness thereof is less by more than 1/2 carat, if made of gold, and less by more than 4/1,000, if made of silver, than what is shown by said stamp, brand, label, or mark. But in case of watch cases and flatware made of gold, the actual fineness of such gold shall not be less by more than 3/1,000 than the fineness indicated by said stamp, brand, label, or mark. Article 188. Subsisting and altering trademark, trade names, or service marks. The penalty of prisión correccional in its minimum period or a fine ranging from 50 to 2,000 pesos, or both, shall be imposed upon 1. Any person who shall substitute the trade name or trademark of some other manufacturer or dealer or a colorable imitation thereof, for the trademark of the real manufacturer or dealer upon any article of commerce and shall sell the same. 2. Any person who shall sell such articles of commerce or offer the same for sale, knowing that the trade name or trademark has been fraudulently used in such goods as described in the preceding subdivision. 3. Any person who, in the sale or advertising of his services, shall use or substitute the service mark of some other person, or a colorable imitation of such mark, or 4. Any person who, knowing the purpose for which the trade name, trademark, or service mark of a person is to be used, prints, lithographs, or in any way reproduces such trade name, trademark, or service mark, or a colorable imitation thereof, for another person, to enable that other person to fraudulently use such trade name, trademark, or service mark on his own goods or in connection with the sale or advertising of his services. A trade name or trademark as herein used is a word or words, name, title, symbol, emblem, sign or device, or any combination thereof used as an advertisement, sign, label, poster, or otherwise, for the purpose of enabling the public to distinguish the business of the person who owns and uses said trade name or trademark. A service mark as herein used is a mark used in the sale or advertising of services to identify the services of one person and distinguish them from the services of others, and includes without limitation the marks, names, symbols, titles, designations, slogans, character names, and distinctive features of radio or other advertising. Article 189. Unfair competition, fraudulent registration of trademark, trade name or service mark, fraudulent designation of origin, and false description. The penalty provided in the next preceding article shall be imposed upon 1. Any person who, in unfair competition and for the purposes of deceiving or defrauding another of his legitimate trade or the public in general, shall sell his goods giving them the general appearance of goods of another manufacturer or dealer, either as to the goods themselves, or in the wrapping of the packages in which they are contained, or the device or words thereon, or in any other features of their appearance which would be likely to induce the public to believe that the goods offered are those of a manufacturer or dealer other than the actual manufacturer or dealer, or shall give other persons a chance or opportunity to do the same with the like purpose. 2. Any person who shall affix, apply, annex or use in connection with any goods or services or any container or containers for goods a false designation of origin or any false description or representation and shall sell such goods or services. 3. Any person who by means of false or fraudulent representation or declarations orally or in writing or by other fraudulent means shall procure from the Patent Office or from any other office which may hereafter be established by law for the purposes the registration of a trade name, trademark or service mark or of himself as the owner of such trade name, trademark or service mark or an entry respecting a trade name, trademark or service mark. Title 5. Crimes relative to opium and other prohibited drugs. Article 190. Possession, preparation and use of prohibited drugs and maintenance of opium dens. The penalty of arresto mayor in its medium period to prisión correccional in its minimum period and a fine ranging from 300 to 1,000 pesos shall be imposed upon 1. Anyone who unless lawfully authorized shall possess, prepare, administer, or otherwise use any prohibited drug. Prohibited drug, as use herein includes opium, cocaine, alpha and beta-eucaine, Indian hemp, their derivatives, and all preparations made from them or any of them, and such other drugs, whether natural or synthetic, having physiological action as a narcotic drug. Opium embraces every kind, class, and character of opium, whether crude or prepared, the ashes on refuse of the same narcotic preparations thereof or therefrom, morphine or any alkaloid of opium, preparation in which opium, morphine or any kind of opium, enter as an ingredient, and also opium leaves or wrappings of opium leaves, whether prepared or not for their use. Indian hemp, otherwise known as marijuana, cannabis, Americana, hashish, bong, guaza, churus, and ganja embraces every kind, class and character of Indian hemp, whether dried or fresh, flowering or fruiting tops of the pistillate plant cannabis sativa, from which the resin has not been extracted, including all other geographic varieties whether used as reefers, resin, extract, tincture or in any other form whatsoever. By narcotic drug is meant a drug that produces a condition of insensibility and melancholy dullness of mind with delusions and may be habit-forming. 2. Anyone who shall maintain a dive or resort where any prohibited drug is used in any form, in violation of the law. Article 191. Keeper, watchman and visitor of opium den. The penalty of arresto mayor and a fine ranging from 100 to 300 pesos shall be imposed upon 1. Anyone who shall act as a keeper or watchman of a dive or resort where any prohibited drug is used in any manner contrary to law and 2. Any person who, not being included in the provisions of the next preceding article, shall knowingly visit any dive or resort of the character referred to above. Article 192. Importation and sale of prohibited drugs. The penalty of prisión correccional in its medium and maximum periods and a fine ranging from 300 to 10,000 pesos shall be imposed upon any person who shall import or bring into the Philippine Islands any prohibited drug. The same penalty shall be imposed upon any person who shall unlawfully sell or deliver to another prohibited drug. Article 193. Illegal possession of opium pipe or other paraphernalia for the use of any prohibited drug. The penalty of arresto mayor and a fine not exceeding 500 pesos shall be imposed upon any person who, not being authorized by law, shall possess any opium pipe or other paraphernalia for smoking, injecting, administering or using opium or any prohibited drug. The illegal possession of an opium pipe or other paraphernalia for using any other prohibited drug shall be prima facie evidence that its possessor has used said drug. Article 194. Prescribing opium unnecessary for a patient. The penalty of prisión correccional or a fine ranging from 300 to 10,000 pesos, or both shall be imposed upon any physician or dentist who shall prescribe opium for any person whose physical condition does not require the use of the same.
End notes. All information presented here, except for the foreword, have been lifted verbatim from publicly available copies of the Revised Penal Code of the Philippines. The foreword is provided as a short explainer and a quick guide to 4-volume video book series. Any errors of commission or omission are ours alone. This video book has been prepared and presented by Review Central solely and entirely for educational and reference purposes. No copyright infringement intended. Review Central would like to thank all the people who contributed time and resources in putting together this 4-volume video book series, including those who shared and contributed materials and, more importantly, their time, free of charge. If you find this material useful, please like and generously share to others who may also benefit from it. You can support us by subscribing to our channel and sharing our review materials in your favorite social media platforms. Thank you.